Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, I am Shavitri Dotto, Coordinator, Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Ddmrm Motichil Robindra Mahavidyalaya. First, I convey my warm greetings on behalf of our college to this webinar organized by Department of Economics in collaboration with IQAC. We have with us our principal sir and all honorable IQAC members and participants from different parts of the country. We are actually very happy to get these overwhelming responses all around the state as well as from all parts of the country. So I, on behalf of our college, extend my warm welcome to all of you. Your presence motivates and inspires us organizing this kind of webinar. Now, in recent months, as we all know that we have been confronted with an exceptional situation. Globally, the number of affected people and number of deaths due to COVID-19 that are climbing up with each passing day. And this pandemic has had an overwhelming effect on our daily life, the way we live, the way we work, and the way we teach, the way we socialize. In every sphere of our life, this pandemic has impacted. So, and this has caused widespread fear and uncertainty. Many sectors of economy like tourism, aviation, shipping, theaters, non-food retail, building and construction, and many other, they are hard hit as a result of restricted demand due to limited movement of people and limited purchasing ability. And disruption in labor supply, work constraint in the working capital, these are also responsible for this limited activity in those sectors. And of course, there are sectors which have experienced upkick or upheaval, like digital and internet economy, online education, online groceries, digital entertainment, and pharma, FMCG, food-based retail, etc. So the adverse effects are suffered by many sectors, namely the financial sector, the banking, stock, industry, service, labor force, and many others. So the pandemic has impacted the public health, the education, the employment, and in the process, overall growth and development of the nations all around the world. Is in the face of a big challenge. So, so what is our economy experiencing? What is the scenario as long as the Indian economy is concerned? So, we will be enriched on this particular topic today from our honorable speaker, Dr. Debashish Mojumdar. So it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Mojumdar here. Dr. Debashish Mojumdar is now serving at the Heritage College, Kolkata, West Bengal, as a professor and head of the department in the Department of Economics. He has been teaching economics both at undergraduate and postgraduate levels for the last 35 years. He completed his postgraduate study in economics from Jadavpur University, Kolkata, MPhil in economics from the University of Calcutta, and done his PhD from Rabindra Bharati University, Kolkata. He started his career as an assistant professor in economics in a government college of South Tripura. During his service period, he has served at Sudhir Ranjan Lahiri Mahavidyalaya, Nodia, and Bangabashi College, Kolkata. He has also been working as visiting faculty at the postgraduate commerce section of Nabapaliganj Mahavidyalaya, Kolkata since 2013. He was also an empaneled research guide for PhD scholars at Vidyasagar University, Medinipur, and 2 scholars have been awarded PhD degree under his guidance. He has co-authored about 35 textbooks in economics, some of which are the prescribed textbooks at the undergraduate level of Calcutta University. And he has also contributed about 60 research articles in national and international journals and edited 2 conference volumes. His research areas consist of international trade, green marketing, rural development, etc. So we all are waiting to hear from Dr. Mojumdar today afternoon. We will get enriched and enlightened from his lecture. So over to Dr. Mojumdar, please, sir.
Is my screen visible to all of you?
No, sir.
What to do? Share.
Sir, go to present now. Yes, it's now coming.
Oh, okay. It is visible now?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. Let me start with my thanks to the organizer, Ddmrm Motijhil Ravindra Mahavidyalaya, for organizing this webinar. And it is my great privilege.
No voice.
Hello? Hello?
No, you are audible, sir.
Okay, okay. It is my great privilege to be invited as a resource person in this webinar. I am really thankful to the principal, Dr. Sandeep Dasgupta of Ddmrm Motijhil Ravindra Mahavidyalaya. Particularly, I am also thankful to Savitri Datta, the coordinator of ICAC of that college, and Shatilekha Haldar, head of the Department of Economics of that college. Actually, giving lecture through in this webinar in this particular platform, particularly on this topic, technically, one difficulty is that normally when we meet together in a particular seminar, we can feel the vibrance or the faces. We can feel your say motivations face to face. But here I miss all of you because your faces are lost. I can only see my screens. That is one of the difficulties that I face now, but I have to accept it. And please, you also accept this particular thing. My topic is growth versus development, a post-COVID analysis with spatial reference to India. Now, actually, the topic that I have chosen should not have been as a growth versus development. It should have been growth and development. But deliberately, I have kept this topic in this form because I think that during this pandemic period, so far as India is concerned, both growth as well as development have been affected. But when we discuss, there are 3 parts of this lecture. One part is about the growth, analysis of that growth pattern. And there is another part regarding the development. And the third part is regarding the policy frame. So when we shall discuss the policy frame, we shall emphasize upon that more emphasis on growth should not be there. Actually, there should be a balanced approach so that the country can move with higher growth in the near future as well as the development. Now, in a classroom teaching, we normally, the teachers of economics and we the students of economics, we know the basic difference between growth and development. I find it relevant to just give a short meaning of the difference between the growth and development. Growth is actually a quantitative measure of economic progress of a country. For example, when you talk about, say, growth in GDP or per capita GDP, you actually indicate the growth part of it. It is all about the quantitative aspect of economic progress. But when you talk about the development, it is a hydra-headed concept. Actually, development is more than the mere growth. And different economists have agreed that, say, if a country experiences growth in terms of higher GDP, doesn't mean that the country will have more development. Development in terms of, say, life expectancy at birth, then gender inequality, then poverty, unemployment, nutrition. There are several aspects, infant mortality, etc. So all these aspects cannot be covered in this lecture within the short time span. I shall take only a few aspects, particularly the unemployment, poverty, and the health aspect I shall cover. Now I move on to the next slide. When we first say analyze the impact of this particular say pandemic situation, when different countries of the world they have been affected, including that of India, we talk about the disruptions in terms of the demand and supply forces, the basic forces, economic forces at work. But when there is a complete or say a partial lockdown that you observe often, as you are observing now, for example, in different parts of West Bengal, we have, and different parts of India also, we are now having, though there is unlock, but there are some partial lockdown in different parts of India. And that lockdown and that pandemic situation as a whole creates disruptions both in supply and demand force. Supply disruption, say, occurs in the form of, say, shutting down of some of the production units in manufacturing sector, in service sector, and in agriculture. And in the demand cases, in case of demand, when we observe there is a loss of job, the fall in income, then the purchasing power, fall in purchasing power, and that arises as a disruption in demand. That is demand shock and supply shock that together say lead to a reduced output, or you can say that gross output of the country and the total expenditure, and that leads to the slow growth of the output growth. So that is the basic thing about the growth say process. Now this slow growth, actually it is not new. We have been experiencing the slow growth trend even before the pre-COVID period. And I have given you some idea regarding what has happened during 2002 to 2017, and what we observed that the real, in terms of real national income and real per capita income, the average annual growth rate it has indicated a gradual downtrend. It has so this falling trend has been intensified actually during this recent pandemic period, and different say institutions at the global level as well as at the local level, they are of the opinion that in near future India will experience even low growth, or even they say negative growth. So different, say Moody, the Fitch, say World Bank, IMF, everybody they have projected some estimated growth for near future. So if we observe this estimation, for example, World Bank estimation, World Bank forecast, it suggests that throughout the globe in 2020, as you observe, a negative say growth rate compared to, this is in real terms, a real growth rate in terms of the previous year. In case of India, they have observed that in 2020 the growth rate will be less than by say 3.2 percentage point compared to our previous year, so compared to 2019. Except East Asia, which includes China, all the say regions throughout the globe, 2020 they have been experiencing, or they're supposed to experience a negative growth. But in 2021 there is a possibility of turnaround, and World Bank forecast is that this turnaround in case of India will be about say 3.1 percentage. So this is all about, these are all conjectures, but we do not know exactly what will happen. Now, so far as another say source from Statista, it is an USA-based source. Based on constant 2017 price, they have indicated some of the biggest economies of the world and what will happen during 2020 based on their GDP size in 2019. So we observe, say, big economies in terms of GDP, for example, China, USA, India, etc. We observe that this red sign indicates the negative growth in 2020, whereas the green sign indicates the positive growth. So in terms of, say, growth, India in 2020 may experience a growth only to the extent of about 2%. Okay, so it is much lower, but World Bank and say IMF, they're of the opinion that yes, it will be low, but it will not be negative growth. Now, what we experience, for example, from our Government of India portal, we experienced that during say fourth quarter of 2017 to first quarter of 2018 and second quarter, there was a high pitch. The growth rate was about 8%, and since then it has been continuously falling. And in the second quarter of 2020, we are observing 3.1%. But in real terms, this is in nominal terms. In real terms, it will be far lower. So what we feel that the estimation, the forecast made by some of the international institutions like World Bank and IMF may come true. It all depends upon what will happen, and we are really in a situation. We have a dark, say, environment. Dark in the sense that we do not know what will happen. We cannot exactly forecast what will happen. So this is the trend that we observe. Now, so far as the trend of development, one of the easiest way of estimating the economic development is the Human Development Index, and I have used this index over the last few years, last few decades for India. And what you observe that over the last few decades, India, in terms of HDI index, it has been developing. So improvement in terms of HDI index may say indicate that yes, in terms of economic development, in terms of the quality of life, India is actually has been progressing towards a better position. But if you go deep into this matter, I have taken one particular aspect, life expectancy at birth. And across countries, I have just compared on the basis of 2018 UNDP report. It suggests that in 2017, I have taken basically the countries which are now affected by COVID or the pandemic. You observe that there are two, say, indicators. One is life expectancy at birth. The other is healthy life expectancy at birth. Now, what is the basic difference between healthy life expectancy and life expectancy? Healthy life expectancy indicates that life expectancy at birth net of the number of years that you have lost due to your physical illness. So if your healthy life expectancy at birth is lower than the estimated life expectancy, then it actually implies that you suffered from some physical illness. That means your, say, lifespan will not become fruitful if you cannot become productive. If you suffer from different type of diseases throughout your during a large part of your lifespan, then that part will be lost from your life. And if you observe that loss due to health reasons are about, in case of India, it is about 13.8%, and it is almost equal to that of USA. And in case of Italy, it is 12%. In case of Brazil, it is 12.8%. Every country, there has been a loss due to the health reasons. Now, one interesting part of this particular slide is that I observe that at present, the countries which are now are being affected, except Russian Federation, the countries which are now being affected much due to this COVID-19, you will find a similarity between here, the loss due to health reasons. Now, in a COVID death case, sometimes you will observe that the doctors, they suggest that comorbidity is the reason. Comorbidity. That means you are suffering, say, your COVID. You are suffering that particular virus, but due to some comorbidity, you are suffering from some other diseases, you can die. You can your this thing your illness can be fatal. So I think this type of comorbidity or this health situation, health reasons were already present, and there will be some hint that the countries now which are suffering much from COVID-19, they had the indication that their healthy life expectancy at birth was really lower, and say a greater percentage from the life expectancy at birth. So this is an indication. Now the next part is that if you take about inequality, this is another indication of economic development part, the quality of life. If there is much more inequality in the distribution of income and wealth, then we consider that country as less developed. So in case of India, when we consider HDI value, in 2017, it was 0.640, but when it is expressed in terms of inequality adjusted HDI as been reported in UNDP report in 2018, we find a loss of 26.8 percentage point. That means when you consider inequality among different income groups, then our achievement in terms of human development is far less than that when we do not consider that inequality of income. And so there is inequality. So in terms of only HDI value, you cannot judge that whether a country is developing or not. So despite some indications in terms of economic development in terms of HDI indices, there are some say particular factors which affect our development path. Next, we come to another analysis in terms of growth. Here, I have divided different parts of India in terms of the share of non-farm and non-government sector in the gross state value added. This data I have collected from CMIE, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, and there it is suggested that in India, in the recent 2018-19 statistics, it is observed that the farm sector and the government sector together, they contribute about 28 to 30% of the GDP of India, but maximum part comes from non-farm and non-government sector. And here we observe that in case of states like Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Delhi, Haryana, Odisha, and Jharkhand, their share of non-farm and non-government sector are much higher compared to the other region, say states of India. For example, in case of Delhi, the share is 86%. That is the share of Delhi in non-farm and non-government sector. As opposed to that, Arunachal Pradesh has a share of only 38%. So when there is a fall in the output, that is when there is a slowdown in the growth process, then the states or the segments of that part of the country will suffer much, where the share of non-farm and non-government sector are higher, because they have the larger share in gross state value added. So this is the interstate differences in the shock. So when there is a say fall in output, how far that will cause an say state differences in terms of the shock, and then how far they will be affected in terms of the fall in the non-farm and non-government sector. Now here, this is much like our textbook type, based on a very interesting article by Baldwin published in 2020. He has indicated that if you consider the national flow of income in a country, as we teach in our classroom that there are multi-sectoral, say intersectoral flow. Here we have government sector, business sector, household, the financial sector, and the rest of the world. And you observe that everywhere there is a red cross, that is the cross mark. This cross marks indicates that if there is a shock within the country in terms of the supply, then the business houses will be affected, and the factor payments will be affected. So the household sector will be affected, and their savings will be affected. And so the financial sector, as a result, will be affected. Everywhere they are interlinked. So the collection of taxes by the government will be affected. They will face difficulty in, say, giving transfer payments or some relief to the household sector. And if there is international disruption in the value chain, global value chain, then our export and import will also, they are going to be affected. So now in a globalized world, every segment within the, say, local economy is being, say, closely interlinked with the global economy. So this disruption in the global value chain or local value chain will certainly, that will lead to a fall in our output, aggregate output. So this is one explanation of, say, how this intersectoral flow are going to be affected due to this decline in the business activities in a country during the COVID or the pandemic situation. Now here I have taken a particular case which is very much interesting to explain the local value chain disruption. It is based on statistical data of 2011-12, indicating the mismatch between the textile and apparel output and the consumption expenditure across different states. For example, in the case of Tamil Nadu, TN means Tamil Nadu, where you observe that the share of Tamil Nadu in total value of output in textile and wearing apparels are much more higher, about say 20%, compared to their share in aggregate expenditure in clothing and bedding. So it means that in case of states like Tamil Nadu or Gujarat or Maharashtra, their share in say textile output is much higher compared to their demand, local demand, that is their consumption share. That means they have to export it they have to sell it to other states, or they have to export it. So if there is there is restriction upon the cross-border movement, then they cannot sell it. That means every state is interdependent. So if within our country there is some supply disruption, then all the states will are going to suffer. And if they suffer, then some of their manufacturing units will be closed down, and as a result, as we have observed, it's a huge number of workers, they will be jobless. So this interstate linkage is very much important to explain the local supply chain. Now we come to the case of the trend during 2011 to 18, the situation in the job sector. We observe a job loss scenario. For example, during 2011 to 2018, an article made by Kannan and Ravindran in Economic and Political Weekly, they have observed that during 2011 and 18, there have been about 6.18 million job loss in our country, and the sectors which have suffered most are agriculture, mining and quarrying, manufacturing, and some particular services. But there have been both net job creation as well as net job loss. Here you observe that during 2011 to 18, that is pre-COVID period, we had net job creation in sectors like real estate, transport, financial service, health, education, information and communication, etc. Now, during the post-COVID situation, excepting the ICT sector, all these sectors which had experienced positive job creation, net job creation, they have also suffered a huge, say shock, that is in terms of job loss. Now, a more technical aspect can be explained in terms of employment elasticity to GDP growth. It indicates the percentage change in employment due to a 1% change in GDP growth. And what we observe that during the last few decades, particularly if you say concentrate your attention during the post-reform period, we had always an elasticity less than 1. For example, in 2005 to 2010, the elasticity was almost 0. And in 2000 to 2005, this elasticity was 0.5. So we call it jobless growth. That means our gross domestic output was, the value of GDP was rising, but the employment generation was less than that of the GDP growth. So it was inelastic. Employment growth was inelastic in say in relation to GDP growth. But what happened during 2012 to 2018 is completely different. We observe a negative elasticity, and here different research works, they have considered this aspect as job loss growth as opposed to jobless growth. So we have moved from an era of jobless growth to job loss growth. So in agriculture, this elasticity was negative. Manufacturing, it was negative during 2018 to 2011 to 18. But in case of trade and service in construction, these were positive. But ultimately, the whole economy, it was negative. It was negative in the whole economy in the sense that the share of employment in agriculture, the share of people depending on agriculture is much, much higher. So that weightage can cause ultimately the whole economy experiencing a negative elasticity of employment. Now coming to another important aspect of development in terms of the poverty, number of poverty-ridden people, the number of poor people. Here also, if you observe the trend of our poverty during the pre-COVID period, say data available only up to 2011-12 normally, and what we observe that the number of poor people in 2011-12 was about 363 million, and recently in 2019, a research paper by Raval in Economic and Political Weekly, they have challenged that figure, and with a new estimation based on malnutrition, they have proved that that figure, 363 million poverty-ridden people, it should be 472, and the poverty rate, that is the percentage of people below poverty line in 2011-12, as per earlier estimate, it should be 39%. So what we observe that the condition of regarding the poverty in India was also very much bad. It was in a bad shape, and throughout the globe, actually, if you follow the say World Bank report throughout the globe during 2012 to 2018, there's been a gradual decline in the poverty incidence of poverty, and that has also happened in India, no doubt. But a recent data, what we observe, published by NSSO in terms of household consumer expenditure in 2017-18. But mind it, this report was actually not published. It was published by NSSO, but Government of India didn't accept it. So it was withdrawn from the social media, from the official site. But whatever figure that I can collect or somebody can collect, it shows that, see, this is for the first time during the last 4 decades that the India observes a fall in food consumption expenditure by the average people. In case of rural India, what you observe, there has been a nearly 10 percentage point decline in the monthly expenditure on food, and on an average, the monthly consumption expenditure has fallen by about 3.3 percentage point, say during 2011-12 to 2017-18. Now, what is the implication? It implies that due to the fall in consumption expenditure, because a poverty line is based on average, say, monthly consumption expenditure per capita. So if there is a fall in consumption expenditure, it must lead to a higher incidence of poverty in India. And World Bank report also in 2020, it suggests that in our part in South Asia, there will be additional 16 million, say, extra burden of poor people. So pandemic situation has definitely, this has led, and this will lead to in near future, if proper steps are not taken, this will lead to a more acute problem of poverty in case of India, problem of unemployment. Now, so far as unemployment is concerned, as you observe, time and again I am just suggesting that if you study economic development, then these are some of the areas you are to concentrate. One important area is unemployment rate. Here you observe that during 2011-12, the unemployment rate in India was 2.3%. It was much higher in urban area. Always urban unemployment rate was higher. In May 2019, it was 7 percentage point, and suddenly May 2020, it skyrocketed. It increased up to 24%. So it is a very, very high, unemployment rate. And in June 2020, so just within 1 month, there has been a fall. Actually, when the unlock started, there has been a fall in the unemployment rate. And now it suggests that sudden increase in the unemployment rate and after unlock, sudden fall, it means that most of the working people in our country, they are in unorganized sector. The unorganized sector, the workers can be retrenched without any compensation at any time. So during the lockdown, when there was a supply shock, when different manufacturing units and business units closed down, then this huge number of workers, they lost their job because their job was not permanent. So the casual workers, they lost their job. The workers in the unorganized sector, they lost their job. Now, despite this fall in the unemployment rate, it is still very high, and higher unemployment would surely imply that the quality of living will be affected. Now, this is another survey, and I want to share with you. This is an interesting survey by CMIE, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, a recent survey. This recent survey during 2020, April 29 to April 2020, suggests that they in this sample survey, they put some questions to the sample households, that is whether their income has fallen, whether their income has increased, or there has been no change in income. So this orange line indicates that during January 2020 to April 2020, percentage of people, the households saying that their income has declined is much higher. That is, they're actually they have lost their job and their income has declined. And the no change in income, that percentage of households that has also declined, that means yes, their income has declined. So there is no question of no change. So all these figures and facts, they imply that during the pandemic period, the condition with regard to the unemployment situation that was there in India, it has much more intensified and led to a huge shock for the households who depend on this unemployment, particularly in the unorganized sector. Now, coming to the area-wise analysis, we have taken some particular sectors, for example, auto manufacturing, retail trade, travel and tourism. In every sector, we observe that the fall in employment, or the job loss compared to the pre-COVID employment situation. For example, in case of travel and tourism, you observe a great shock where about 38 million workers, they have lost their jobs. In case of retail trade, retail trade, I have considered, based on Economic Times data, I have considered both organized and unorganized sector retail trade. Here also there was a job loss and auto manufacturing, and you must have known that every day in newspaper you will be observing that different companies say they cannot sell even a car during the last few months. Now, in case of restaurant, in case of real estate, in case of education sector also, we observe the similar situation. For example, in case of real estate, in the construction works, here the real estate sector, here construction.
Somebody's microphone is on. Please mute your microphone.
Microphone, please mute. Otherwise, it is very difficult to give a lecture. Now, in the real estate segment, I have considered not only the service but also construction workers. So, in real estate segment, here you observe that 70 million out of 70 million employment, about 14 to 15 million workers, they have lost their jobs. Most of them are migrant workers, and you know that what situation, their condition, the miserable condition they have suffered. Now, according to different sector, their share in the gross value added and their share in employment, what I feel is that even if there is a fall in output, uh, impact will be judged on the basis of the share of employment in that particular sector. For example, in case of construction, although their share in gross value added is only 8% in 2019 figure, their employment share was 12%. And in case of financial service, its share,
Push.
please mute.
Mute your microphone. Can you please mute your microphone?
Uh, uh, in case of financial service, we observe that 22% share, a very large share in the gross value added of say Indian economy, but their employment share is much more lower, only 3.4%. So if there is a fall in output, then the impact will be much more higher in case of construction sector compared to that of financial service and professional service sector. That is my point. Now, in case of MSME segment, this is one of the most important sector which contributes a lot towards Indian export and Indian, GDP. But here, a sample survey done by Statista of USA among 28,000 small entrepreneurs, they have in June 2020, it has been observed that during the COVID-19, this particular pandemic situation in India, about 38% of those small and micro enterprises, they were out of funds, and some of say 12% of them had only 1 month's fund. That means they were suffering from a liquidity crunch because they could not sell anything, so they are suffering from say cash. So they cannot invest anymore. They had to retrench their laborers. So the small segment, the MSME segment, suffered a loss. So this part of the slide, my objective is to show that how MSME sector, which contributes a lot towards employment, income, and export of Indian economy, they have suffered a lot due to this pandemic, and that is surely going to affect our aggregate output and the employment situation, particularly in the unorganized sector in our economy. Now, another particular statistical information provided by Ministry of Statistical say Programming and Implementation. They have in January 2020 they have published this data, and where it is observed that the share of private final consumption expenditure in the total domestic expenditure is was about 26% in the food and non-alcoholic beverage, and I have deliberately put some red mark where we observe that if there is some lockdown, if there is some restriction upon the movements, so particularly during the lockdown period, the people, for example, the households, they will spend, say, no doubt on their food, the basic necessities of life, but they may cut expenditure on clothing, they may cut expenditure on transport, recreation and culture, because the cinemas are all off. There is no scope to go to restaurant or hotels. So in all these areas, there are cases or say apprehensions of a cut in consumption, final consumption expenditure, and that will lead to a demand shock. If there is a fall in the consumption in those areas by the household segment, then there will be a demand shock, that is low demand for these products. Now coming to the international or the global value chain, it is in terms of the supply shock. Now global value chain here indicates that whenever any product is produced from the pre-fabrication period up to the final product stage, now different parts of the globe, different countries are interconnected. There are in this global value chain report of 2020 by World Bank, it shows that the three main hubs of global value chain now is USA, China, and Germany. Now you observe that in case of Indian connection with global value chain, India is more connected with China. India's dependence with China, India, not only India, Indonesia, then Malaysia, then Pakistan, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, Laos, Japan. Now there is a complicated interlink. So if there is a break, so if the different countries of the world suffer from this pandemic, then and the production process hampers, then different countries will be affected in different ways. So a supply shock in the global level appears in the form of the breakage in the global value chain. So my objective is to find how a break in the global value chain will also have an impact upon Indian economy in near future. For example, I've taken an example of, say, manufacturing a cycle. It is say improved, say, electronic computerized bicycle produced in Vietnam, and the global value chain report suggests that different spare of this particular cycle is being collected from different parts of the globe. For example, it's a seat coming from Italy, its spoke and wheels coming from China. So different parts are coming from different segments of the world. So if there is this break of global value chain, then it will be very difficult for any country to produce any particular product, because all the countries are now very much interlinked. So this supply shock, if there is a supply shock in the international level, then it will affect different countries in a different way. It will depend upon how much they are connected in the global value chain. Now, India's dependence in the global value chain. To explain this, I have taken some of the countries who have been affected by the COVID-19 and India's dependence on that country, on those countries. For example, India's dependence compared to, say, Italy or Spain or USA or South Korea or Japan or Germany, India's dependence in terms of its import payment is much more higher in case of China. For example, India's import in say 2018-19 was about $70 billion from China, and its share of that import was 13.7% in the total import value from say different countries of the world. So India's dependence on China for different types of imports are huge. And now if you look into what type of products India import from China, we observe that it includes electrical machinery, machinery and nuclear reactor, organic chemicals, plastics, different types of products. And for example, in case of electrical machinery and equipments, India depends about, say, 40% on China and 60% on other resources. So if now, for example, recently, said our country, say, raised a voice that we have to boycott the Chinese goods, and we have to depend on other sources, or we have to become Atmanirbhar. Now the question is, our dependence on different type of intermediate goods on China cannot be, say, solved overnight. That means we cannot become Atmanirbhar overnight. It will require, say, a perspective planning. It will require some time to create that particular type of infrastructure so that we can we can manufacture those say intermediate goods. So it is not easy to relocate our say dependence from China say immediately. So we must say our future planning must be framed in that particular way. Now, so far as the value added in our exports, for example, how far our say foreign components add value to our exports. That is, in case of, I have just make a comparison between India with Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam, and we observe that a foreign value-added component as a percentage of Indian exports, manufacturing exports, is only 27.3%. It actually implies that India's involvement in the global value chain is much weak compared to Vietnam or Thailand or Malaysia. Okay, from this angle, our impact, say impact on our manufacturing sector will be not to that extent, because we depend not too much upon the foreign components in our manufacturing sector, so far as the manufacturing sector is concerned. However, what we observe in the export and import segment, we observe that our overall say export import trend and our balance of trade balance. Here I have taken both say merchandise trade as well as services, and we observed that during the last say few months, during say particularly December 2019 to May 2020, there has been a fall in both export and imports. So our export earning has fallen, our import payment has also declined. Import payment declined, because our imports decline. But what is more significant is that the import payment is now less than our export earnings. So the trade balance is now positive, positive in a bad time. So over the last few, say for example, 2019, the trade balance was negative, and now it is positive, but we are observing a downtrend in our exports. So if that has to be, there has to be an upturn. But through your effort only, you cannot make this upturn. Say throughout the global environment, if say, situations in other countries, your trading partners, if their situations are not improved, then you alone cannot improve your export earnings. Okay. So overall, now what you observe is that the overall what we observe that this pandemic situation has led to an economic crisis, no doubt, a massive job loss that I have already explained. Income inequality has increased, food insecurity has increased, and workers in the informal sector, normally they were hard hit, I have already indicated. And the migrant workers, say some of them are within the country, some of them are outside the country, and whenever they lose their jobs, then the remittances to their families are also falling, and hence the economic condition of those families, those who depend on those remittances from their migrant family members, actually their condition is very bad. Now, in the labor market, also we observe a polarization. Polarization in the labor market means a division between the skilled and unskilled laborer. And different research papers in this field has indicated that in India, during the last few months, what we have observed is that the skilled laborers, for example, in the ICT sector, they will survive, and very low skilled laborers, they may also survive. For example, say the vendors, the hawkers, they may survive, daily laborers. But in the middle level, those who perform some routine-based workers, in future, what may happen that they may be substituted by some machines. So what we observe, for example, we are now having our seminar, in the webinar, in a virtual platform. So you are not depending upon your suppliers. For example, if this seminar is, if it is say organized, say physically in your college, then you can imagine that different suppliers would have been involved, but now they are not involved. So the polarization means in the middle segment, if some labor can be substituted by machine, then those laborers will suffer whose say physical work will be substituted by machine or by robots, by say artificial intelligence, etc. And what is more important is health shock, and I will explain that, particularly the health part. And there is actually a trade-off between life and livelihood. For example, during the sudden, say, lockdown in different parts of West Bengal, what you observe is that different people, they are not actually say, they're violating their norms, say the restrictions imposed by the government. Why? Because they are desperate. They want to leave. Okay, they don't bother about their life. So there is a trade-off between life and livelihood. If you want to save your life, you earn less. If you want to earn more, you risk your life. So there is a trade-off between life and livelihood. And both ILO report also that has indicated that in our part in South Asia and this Pacific, yes, this pandemic has resulted in huge say job loss. Now, so far as the development is concerned, because I have already told you the development is a hydra-headed concept. So whenever you say think of the quality of life, we must also consider the psychological say impact upon the people. Say we can normally say the doctors, they use a term like agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is a fear of going to public places. For example, in near future, people may not, for example, the parents may not send their kids to the school. We may not go to the say cinema hall, etc. There will be anxiety, fear everywhere. And one of the famous book written by Richard Drudy, the name of the book is Virus of the Mind. And in that particular book, he has indicated that there are three universes One is biological universe, where we observe the virus, for example, COVID-19. There is another universe which is man-made universe, where you observe the computer virus. But there is another universe of your mind. If there is virus in your mind, and Richard Brody has called it an unit called as meme. Meme means an unit of information in your mind that can replicate itself, and it is influenced by your environment. So if your mind is infected, if you are full of negativity, that also will reduce your work capacity. So this is one important area, so psychological cost. And UNDP say reports, and several economists, they are very much concerned about the gender inequality during particular this pandemic period, because they feel that mostly 70% of the workers in the health and social sector are women, and they are what we call the front warriors, but they are most vulnerable to health risk. So in your house also now, the women, the female members of your family, they have to look after some of the ailing, say, the family members, their children, or schools are off. So the maximum part of the brunt is being borne by the females, being opined by different reports. Now, to overcome this particular situation, different countries of the globe, including that of India, have indicated some, say, stimulus, that is, government stimulus, government expenditure, through which the fiscal stimulus, monetary, say, measures. In case of India, we know that the 10% of about the GDP, about say 20 lakh crores, they have been spent by they will be spent by government of India to overcome this demand shock, the situation, the slowdown situation. And different countries of the world, they have also but in my there's a little scope in my particular today's lecture to analyze more on this issue. I'm just indicating that there are two ways to cope up this situation. One is monetary, the other is fiscal. But several economists, including Abhijit Vinayak Bandyopadhyay, say our several Nobel laureates, they are of the view that the government should depend more on fiscal stimulus, that is a direct income transfer in the hands of the poor, more required, rather than say giving more say facility to take loan from the banks at a lower rate of interest, because government expenditure multiplier will work much more say with much more positivity compared to the tax multiplier. So what we suggest is that the government should give more emphasis on food and nutrition security, support to the migrant workers, the cash transfer to the unemployed in say informal sector workers, and they must have affordable healthcare and sickness benefit they should get. The old aged people, they must have a survivor benefit. So all these benefits are required to improve the say purchasing power of the people, common people. Now, so far as the health segment, which is I am say interested in indicating this health sector, what we observe that if you compare between the high income and low income countries, in the high income country, the public expenditure on health in 2017 was about 5.6%, whereas in case of India, it was only about 1.17. It was even lower compared to the low income countries or middle income countries. So public expenditure on health is much lower in case of India. And if you see the trend of India's say public expenditure on health, it is only about say 1.28% in the year 2018. So it is much lower compared to the need that we need more. A recent survey made by Statista in USA, say about 13,200 respondents were there in several countries, including that of India. The question was, do you consider that your jobs should be saved by the government, or your lives should be saved by the government? That is, should your government take necessary action so that your life, the life risk should be taken care of, or that you should not lose your jobs. That is more important to the government. The most of the respondents, for example, in case of India, 64% of the respondents, they are of the opinion that yes, the government should take the responsibility to minimize our health risk. So people also believe that the government has a responsibility to minimize the health risk that the people suffer at present. Now, this is an interesting figure, statistical figure that I have collected from the WHO website. In COVID-19 scenario, and this is important, 2016 figure, I have taken the health expenditure per capita across states, across nations. And here, what you observe, most interestingly, what you observe is that the health expenditure as a percentage of GDP, the higher in countries where it is higher, they have also suffered COVID death higher as a percentage of total COVID cases. As I have taken a figure as on 5th May 2020. So it is counterintuitive in the sense that the countries which spend more on health, they are suffering more in terms of COVID death. That is, how can it be? That means normally our argument is that if any country spends more on health care, then this COVID cases, death cases at least, must be lower. But here, these figures are to some extent counterintuitive. But I shall come to this point later. But here I have taken another thing. I have compared between the military expenditure and health expenditure, a comparison. And these red bars indicate that the percentage of military expenditure is a percentage of GDP. For example, it is highest in Saudi Arabia. In case of India, it is 2.4% of the GDP. And these green bars indicate the health expenditure as a percentage of GDP. In case of India, health expenditure, public plus private, it is about 3.53% in case during 2017-18. In case of if you consider only public expenditure, it is about, say, 1.8%. So much lower than that in case of our military expenditure. So my viewpoint is that if we can reduce the military expenditure, if for future planning, if we can reduce our military expenditure to some extent and give more emphasis on health expenditure, then that should be one of the important strategies to be followed by the government to fight against COVID, because COVID, this type of virus will also be present in near future. Here I have given a health infrastructure equivalence military expenditure. This is very interesting, this figure. For example, India, with the tension with the Chinese border in case of, say, this Pangong Lake near Ladakh, India is having, say, India is purchasing fighter jet. Now here, what I want to share with you that a fighter jet, F-35 fighter jet, which costs about $89 million, that is equivalent to maintaining ICU bed maintenance for 3,244 ICU beds can be maintained for a whole year if you do not purchase one fighter jet. For example, if you do not purchase one Leopard 2 tank, which costs about $11 million, then you can purchase 440 ventilators. If you do not purchase one submarine, which costs Virginia class submarine, which costs about $2,800 million, then you can have, say, fully equipped ambulance. You can purchase 9,180. So in this way, you can have a health infrastructure equivalence of military expenditure. That means if you reduce your military expenditure, then you can strengthen your health expenditure. This is only an example. But here, one interesting story in case of India is that across, I have taken 15 particular states. Across Indian states, I have segregated them according to their ranking in terms of per capita health expenditure, where Kerala comes first. Kerala is first in terms of per capita health expenditure. I have taken 2014-15 figure. And I have also considered health expenditure as a percentage of gross state domestic product. And I also have considered the urbanization. Now, we have recently, along with one of my say students, he is now a professor, Professor Mainak Bhattacharya of Loreto College. We together have our research work, and in our research work, we have observed that if there is more urbanization in any particular state, then there is more possibility of death as a percentage of confirmed COVID cases. And if a state spends more on say per capita health expenditure, so where per capita health expenditure is higher, and there the death case as a percentage of confirmed COVID cases is lower. So this is much more actually suggestive of a situation that in future you are to give more importance, yes, on your health infrastructure. So many state governments are now giving more emphasis, and our suggestion is that yes, to overcome the future, this danger or say shocks that we may suffer in near future, we must give more importance to the this. So this is the last part of my slide. On the end of my lecture. So what should be our policy roadmap? So far I have explained the problems in the growth front, problems in the development front. So in future, when our policymakers to prepare some strategies, they must give more emphasis not only on growth but also on development. There must be a balanced strategy. Proper fiscal and monetary policy support should be there, so that output of different sectors should grow. But these policies should also protect the livelihood and income of the common people. That is my suggestion. And public expenditure, as I have already told, on health, education, and nutrition should increase. In education, we must spend more on skill formation, because the next few decades will be of skill. Because if you see the segmentation of the contribution of different sectors in our GDP, we observe that the service sector contributes most. But now there is a scope of servicification of manufacturing activities. Servicification of manufacturing activities is a recent phenomenon which observes that now in different manufacturing sector, the service items are much more important. For example, recently we invited one engineer from USA who came to our college, Heritage College. He is a renowned engineer in USA. He said that they have developed a software which, if put into your car, it will be working like a black box. That means if your speed is more than that say admitted limit, then there will be a caution, and if there is an accident, you will not get insurance coverage if you drive dangerously. That black box will be checked by the insurance company. So this is a service provider. So it is manufacturing. You are manufacturing your car, but your value added consists of different services. So we have, in future, we have a scope of servicification in the manufacturing sector. In that segment, we must emphasize, and that requires proper skill formation and proper government and non-government expenditure on education. And we also need a coordinated effort between nations, because it is a global problem. So if you want to fight it out, we need a global coherence, global cooperation. And at the local level, we need a cooperation between the state government and the union government of the central government to fight it out. So thanks to all of you once again, and thanks to Ddmrm Matijil Ravindra Bharati Mahavidyalaya to giving me this chance of sharing my views within this limited time period. It is not possible to cover all areas. I have tried my level best to just touch upon some of the important segments which I find most important to explain my opinion. Thank you. Charity, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes. So thank you, sir, for such an insightful and enriching lecture. So it has been really very useful for us, and useful as well as informative for all of us. And I'd request you to take a few quick questions which have been put forward in the chat box. Should we start?
If you just tell me that question, because I have some problems with my eyes, So if you just,
I'm just picking the question up and reading it out. Yeah. Okay. And just a minute before going to the question answer session, I just want to make an announcement that the feedback link has already been shared in the chat box. And Shatilekha, you please please write there how long this feedback link will be open, will be active, and you have to fill this in order to generate the e-certificate, because this is necessary for generating e-certificate. So Shatilekha, please write there how long this will be active. So the questions are, the first question is from Professor Polash Naya. Please mute yourself. Please, madam, mute yourself. Please, Bishobhit Bormon, your microphone is on. Please, can you please mute this?
Yes, ma'am.
Some background sound is coming. So, okay, thank you. So the first question is Polash Naya. Professor Polash Naya, he is asking that what are the strategy or approach to develop demand supply in the pandemic situation?
In my lecture, I have already explained that how to fight out this particular shocks through our government policies. For example, in case of demand shock comes in the form of loss in income, loss in purchasing power. So to solve that particular problem in respect of demand shock, the government should create more job opportunities. For example, one example that I can give you is in terms of, say, MGNRGA or Manrega, and the government has allocated about 40,000 crore rupees for the migrant workers who are coming back to their villages. But I have calculated that that particular allotment is not sufficient. For example, there are about 8 crore of migrants who are now coming back, who have returned to their native villages, and government has announced that their daily wages will be uplifted from 182 rupees to 202 rupees. And if they are up to May 2020, about 2 crore of say additional workers have been offered say job cards. But still, if you consider 8 crore of migrant workers, still 6 crore of workers are to be offered job. If they are to be offered job for at least 100 days, then 600 crore man days are to be created, and I have calculated about, say, 1,12,000 crore are to be required if you were to give employment to all those migrant workers. So the government the spending on the part of the government in this particular front will be say much more. We need much higher allocation, and in terms of growth, different say already government has announced different say stimulus package for the different manufacturing units. For example, in MSME, the government has has announced that from different banks they will have say loan without any collateral, etc. And they're say on easy the credit facilities will be easier, the conditionalities will be easier. So I think that if the government can give both fiscal and monetary stimulus to the manufacturing sector, so the supply shock can be mitigated, and it all depends upon how the internal this supply internal business environment is created. For example, if there is lockdown, if there is cross-border restrictions upon the movement of goods and services, then surely there will be say different business units will face troubles, and surely different people will will not get their jobs back. So I feel that definitely the government has to play the most crucial role to overcome this situation, as you have said, in terms of development in the sense that the quality of life for most of the people has to be improved. So the government expenditure has to be increased, to get themselves employed. There should be direct cash transfer and proper stimulus to some of the say our manufacturing sector or production units or business units should be stimulated. That is my answer.
The second question is from Professor Madhvi. Corona has impacted every sector of economy. Under which component of business environment it can be classified?
Business environment, actually, this is a paralyzing feature. Business environment where it actually new say vocabularies are there. For example, the corona infused vocabularies. Now we have a lockdown. We never heard this vocabulary. Now this business environment is actually a paralyzing market forces. Actually, both supply and demand forces are not working. So it is a peculiar business environment where we observe that the market forces are not working. That is, supply and demand forces are not properly working. So here, I think that the government has a role to play to mend this type of paralyzing feature. So a business environment within our country, a business environment throughout the globe, what you observe is that everywhere, as you have shown in my slides, that the global supply chain has disrupted and different countries of the world are suffering in a different way. And the business environment that you observe now is not a free world. That is, you cannot move freely. So the free market forces are not there. So it is a controlled market environment still, not what I feel now. So this is a controlled environment, not a free environment. That is my answer.
Okay. The third question is put forward by Professor Qazi Nurul Hamim. He is asking that in terms of COVID-19, the economic disaster that has been fallen the background or marginalized people of the village, which process can recover it?
Sir, I have already answered in my earlier, while giving the answer to my earlier question, that the marginalized people, that means the poor, the jobless, the migrant workers, the workers in the unorganized sector, they are the marginalized group. Those are very poor. Now, they have a very poor resilience. Poor resilience in the sense that they do not have any alternative. For example, when you observe that the auto drivers, they are losing their job. They have suddenly you have seen that they have shifted from auto driving to hawker. So they are now selling vegetables. But it is not always possible for very poor people to shift from one job to another job, because different jobs require different skill. So when there is inelasticity of shifting jobs from one segment to another, these marginalized people must be given proper food security support. As you have observed that both central government and the state governments are giving food support in different parts of the country. For example, in Kerala, they have supplied food products to their these migrant workers, which they call as guest workers. In Kerala, migrant workers, the government do not call them migrants, they call them guests. So for guest workers, they have arranged 138 community kitchen. So through community kitchen during this COVID situation, they have supplied their necessary food. So the government should come forward with the proper food security support and income support to these marginalized people. That is my answer.
The fourth question is from Professor Debanjan Dash. How can we increase the demand of manufacturing products in post-COVID scenario?
Actually, in the manufacturing sector, the demand depends on both our domestic demand as well as foreign demand. Now, you must have observed that the consumer choice has changed. Their behavior has changed. For example, at the beginning of the lockdown period, you must have seen that the people are purchasing products in dozens, because they fear that it will continue for long, and they may suffer from the paucity or the supply of some basic necessities of life. Now, since the income of the people have declined, income of the
What if
people has
people are
declined,
doing a
so
lot of people are here? Amta, sorry.
they would now require the necessity items. So I think that the manufacturing sector, the demand, they should produce those products which are required for the basic necessity, for fulfilling the basic necessities of life. Because as you have observed in one of my slides, if you have observed, that the government has suggested that different segments of consumer expenditure, which is on, say, the recreation, the transport, etc., and that will be actually cut because they do not have any scope. So if you should not now invest more on, say, your building your cinema hall. Okay, that will not give you much more return. So, but if you invest on online teaching, if you invest on online supply chain, that will be say much more profitable. So I think the investors should choose areas where there is demand according to the changed preference pattern of the customers, and that type of investment will be beneficial in future for India.
There is a question from Professor Taposh Bormon. Sir, what necessity we should take to minimize over increasing unemployment of rural India this pandemic situation? So I think this has
I think this answer has already been given.
Yeah.
This is enough.
There is another question from Professor Arun Ghosh. In this present pandemic condition, how the small business will survive and the associated people develop themselves? Please throw some light on it.
Actually, a small business means particularly the MSME segment. Now, MSME segment, according to the old definition, those who are in the manufacturing segment, they're less than 10 lakhs of rupees, 20 lakhs of rupees in fixed capital, but that has now been increased to about 1 crore and the business turnover up to 5 crore. Actually, they have suffered most, the small and micro enterprises. Now, government realizing their particular the problem, the government has announced, for example, in their you must have been say aware about the Atmanirbhar package that has been announced by the government, and before that, Reserve Bank of India has also announced some monetary support for these MSME segment, and they can take say loan on easy terms from the banks, but my what is my feeling is that if you go through properly, say through those announcements, you will observe that the MSME, those who have say good record and where the overdues is about say 25 crore with the bank, they can only apply for fresh loan. But most of the say small and micro enterprises, they do not have the huge amount of say borrowing from the say bank, so they will not be eligible for getting fresh loan from the bank, and there is some other say scope or say announcement is that the MSME which are actually suffering from bad debts, they can also take loan, but the already those who are suffering from bad debts, they will not also be willing to take fresh loan from the banks, because they know it very well that even if they produce, the demand is low, and the pattern of demand has changed. So I feel that the government should come with some new packages where they will suggest the areas where this small and micro enterprises should proceed. For example, now the government is suggesting that the small toys, for example, which we imported from China, or the instruments of say mobile phones which we used to import from China, should be produced in India. So I think the government should now give more encouragement to those small enterprises to produce those components which India used to import before from China. So that will give much more impetus for those enterprises to say do their business in a proper way. I think the strategy should be changed.
The question from Professor Shonjit Kumar: how to improve the demand? Most of the people jobless in middle class families.
How many questions are there? Should we take all the questions?
No. I just there are few more questions. Possibly, just I will proceed with one more question, then that will be all.
Because I feel tired actually.
Yeah, of course, sure.
Please. What is the
So,
next question?
so this is how to improve the demand. Most of the people jobless in middle class families.
Actually, in our discussion, we have already told that what should be done for the middle class families. Middle class families suffer most because they pay income tax. They cannot move towards the say normal life, or say very low level of living or very high level of living. So they are suffering most. So I think here they should be given say concession in terms of income tax rebate, deferred payment income in terms of income tax, and say their ration, say their arrangement for their ration. For example, now rationing is available for BPL. I think for some period, the APL families, middle class families, should be provided with some sort of facilities to avail from the ration shops, so that they can their livelihood, the cost of living can be saved to some extent. Actually, from middle class families. So my suggestion is particularly for some tax benefit, benefit in terms of insurance premium payment, say in terms of say senior citizen, say interest rate. For example, I am a senior citizen, but over the last few years, what I have observed is that the interest rate on my bank deposit has been reducing. So the government should take steps so that for senior citizens who are in the middle class family, their interest rate on their fixed deposits should not be reduced further. So these are some of the measures that the government can take so as to safeguard the interest of the middle class families. That is my answer.
Okay, the last question of this session is from Professor Shweta Mondol. Sir, if military expenditure is reduced to compensate for health infrastructure, even it be in short run, but a question arises that this will lead our country at a state of danger by our neighboring countries. What is your opinion?
No, actually, normally your question is a brilliant question. Actually, there is a trade-off between when you teach in the class. If you are an economics teacher, when you teach in the class, you draw a production possibility curve. On the one hand, you have military commodity, and on the other hand, you have consumption goods. So if you are to produce more, you have to sacrifice in terms of other. For example, now in this situation, under the COVID situation, when the country is facing a lot of troubles in terms of this health infrastructure. So my suggestion was that for the time being, we should reduce a bit of military expenditure. It is not only the responsibility on the part of India, it is responsibility throughout the globe across nations. For example, in absolute terms, the military expenditure of US is much more higher compared to that of India. So if globally all the nations take the strategy of reducing a bit of military expenditure and spend more on health expenditure, then I think it will be better for in future for any country to fight against this type of COVID situation, because this type of virus, it will come again and again in a mutated form. It will mutate. It will when it replicates, it mutates. Okay, so it is very difficult. We do not know when any vaccine will come, and the vaccine, what is what is applicable or fruitful in case of China may not be fruitful in case of India. So I think that in near future, our government should come forward with proper health expenditure, even after cutting our military expenditure, and there should be a bilateral agreement between countries. There lies the importance of say agreement between, or cohesion or compromise between nations. So there lies the importance of global cooperation. So globally, the country must sit together and take the decision that they must together reduce their military expenditure and spend more on health. And that should be the betterment for the human civilization in future.
Okay. So thank you, sir. And And there are certain some other questions, but sir has been talking for such a long time. He's feeling tired, so hope you understand that these questions cannot be addressed at this point. And before going to we are in the last part of the session, and before going to the vote of thanks, I just want to ask one thing to Professor Majumdar, that some of the participants, they have asked for your PPT. So can it be shared just for your
PPT, I will try to send it, okay, because my PPT is in a sketchy form, okay. Every now and then I change it. Because the COVID situation, the information that is relevant for you now, when you get the PPT, the situation will change and the PPT will be useless. Okay, so instead of getting PPTs, you just prepare yourself. You prepare your mind. You make your mind open. Okay, you make your mind open, because the mind has a virus. So say reduce your virus from your mind, and then a fresh PPT will appear in your mind, and there will be a glaring PPT, the new PPT that I want from you.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm just announcing once more that feedback link has already been shared in the chat box, and this link will be active up to 6:30 p.m. today. Please fill in the feedback link, feedback form before 6:30 p.m. and this will help us in preparation of e-certificate. And after 6:30 p.m. the link will not work. So please copy the link and store somewhere. Now the vote of thanks part. First, I like to thank our honorable speaker, Dr. Debashish Majumdar, who despite his busy schedule has found time to grace this session. In fact, Dr. Majumdar's mother presently is seriously ill, and we are extremely grateful to you, sir, despite that you have agreed to speak in our webinar. So this is our great honor. And I extend my thanks to our principal sir for all possible support and encouragement he has extended to us. I like to thank the head of the Department of Economics, Shatilekha, convener of this webinar as well, for conceptualizing this webinar and taking all the initiatives for organizing such a wonderful talk. And I owe my heartiest gratitude to all distinguished IQAC members, without whose continuous support this program would not have been successful. And a special thanks goes to Professor Ratul Nundi of Department of Education for his untiring effort of managing many parts of the technical side. So my heartfelt thanks to all my colleagues and friends who are present over here. And finally, on behalf of our college, Ddmrm Motichil Rabindra Mahavidyalaya, I would like to express my appreciation to all the participants for taking time out of their busy duties to attend this webinar. So thanks once again for being with us. And we are organizing some more webinars probably at the end of this month or in the month of August, second week of August. So the announcement for those webinars will be there in our website. So please keep a watch on our website. Come and join with us. We are cordially inviting all of you in the webinars that are coming. So thank you all for being with us. Thank you, sir. Sir,
thank you so much. Should I also fill this this what you told? That
feedback. No, sir.
Okay.
This is for participants only.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. So, principal sir, can you end this session? Sir, are you there? Sir? Okay, some connection issue might be there. So thank you. We are ending this session. So thank you, Professor Majumdar.
Thank you.
So participants are requested to please log off.